Well, Sandy was the start of all of that. She had a practice that was developing by doing contracts first and representing surrogates and families. And that just started getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think it really started with my legal practice when I was representing surrogates and intended parents, obviously not in the same cases, but separate cases. And people started asking for more like non-legal work, like matching things and stuff like that we really wouldn't do as lawyers. And John had started an adoption agency before, and so it just seemed to be kind of a natural next step, I guess, for surrogacy.
And there was a clear need, and by that time we represented hundreds of thousands of families in adoption, and we found it more and more difficult to do adoption simply because the children weren't available to adopt. And surrogacy appeared on our screen, at least, and we just saw a way to meet a huge need for all of the people that we spent so much time with that wanted to complete their families. And I started practicing in 1975, and I started a general litigation practice. Before too long, I joined a firm of it was 4 other lawyers, and I continued with the litigation for years until I started doing adoption. And the adoption actually goes back towards the beginning, although I didn't do very much of it. And that was because the firm that I worked for did a lot of adoption initially. And I found, candidly, that they didn't know anything about it. That even though they were legally, they were able to understand the documents, file the documents, and explain them to a client, they didn't know anything about pregnancy. They didn't know anything about pregnant women, which was just astonishing to me, understanding what they were doing for a living. And I'd had the good fortune to have been the child of a nurse and a woman who ran what they call, this is in the 60s and 70s, an untimely pregnancy clinic. And so, and she had really strong feelings about the work that she had. And so that was dinner table conversations. We spent hours talking about pregnancy, and we talked about the complexities of specific cases that she had been working on. And she started, as soon as I started working as a lawyer, she started sending me cases that really were interesting. And so from the first couple of years on, in addition to having a firm that had a background in adoption, I had a background myself, and so it was really easy for me to take over the practice there. And they didn't particularly want it anyway, but it was stuff that I had background in. And I also, my mom would bring the pregnant women into the house, and they would spend time there. They would stay there, maybe for just 2 or 3 months, and towards the end of their pregnancy. And those were women who, not always, but usually were planning an adoption. And so, I mean, none of this was kind of, the personal dynamics of it were comfortable for me. Discussing the issues were comfortable for me. And so it was just kind of it just fit really comfortably. It fit well.
I started practicing law in 1985, and I worked at the Oregon Supreme Court and at the Oregon Court of Appeals as a law clerk for a couple of years, and then I went to work for Chally and Marshall, I think it was at the time, and there were, I don't know, probably 8 lawyers, 10 lawyers or something like that there. And I worked primarily for John, helping with research and writing and some litigation and some appellate work and some personal injury. And I was actually very interested in the adoption practice as well. So I started doing a lot of adoption work, and there was also the adoption agency that he had started was also in the same building as our law practice. So there was a lot of work going back and forth between that agency and the law firm. And then I started doing some legal work in the surrogacy world, and it just seemed, it was so interesting because it was new and there weren't a lot of laws that existed around surrogacy at that time, or any other kind of third-party reproduction. And the medicine was changing. It was really dynamic. People didn't get pregnant back in those days very easily, so IVF was still pretty new, and it wasn't really a great business model for a surrogacy agency to start with, because you really want your families to get pregnant, and of course the surrogate wants to get pregnant and gives that family a baby. So it was exciting to watch the medicine change and progress. And then of course, you know, we went from through all of the different stages, watched the different stages of how many days did they grow the embryos, and then of course there were egg donors that came in and helped a lot with families who couldn't otherwise use their own eggs, and it made it possible for gay families and single dads, and it just really opened up a world that was new and exciting. It was just really fun to watch it all change. Partly because we have a very open view of things, and we really didn't have, at that time, I think California might have had surrogacy law.
Not much, but
they're just,
certainly they established their statutes much earlier than virtually anybody else.
We had good medical clinics here.
I think it was a couple of those things. I think that we started doing work with Oregon Health Sciences University, and there was a woman there who was really, really interested in surrogacy. And I think that she was instrumental in bringing us out and helping us develop surrogacy in Oregon. And then Oregon Reproductive Medicine was absolutely excited by surrogacy. They were extraordinarily skillful. They were able to achieve pregnancies consistently and at a high percentage. And so all of a sudden, because of the developing medicine, we really were in a situation where people were getting pregnant, where people were in fact getting what they wanted out of a surrogacy. To begin with, that so many of them failed. That's what Sandy referred to when she said it was a bad business model. You bring somebody in and you get the best medicine you had. You couldn't achieve a pregnancy, and they'd spent time, effort, their emotion, and they weren't getting babies. And that's what was so much fun about the early process of this is, and in a period of, it seems like 5 years, 10 years at the most, that all of that was changing. And there was also a question about how many that we had at the beginning. And so what happened was is that Sandy would talk to people, and she would talk to them about the services that we were offering. First, just at the law firm, which included very much of the kind of work that we're doing now. And I can remember the first year we had 2 or 3, and the next year 4 or 5, and then things started to pick up. And at the beginning of the year, Sandy and I established a goal of how many per
maybe 1 or 2 a month.
I think it was one a month. And I particularly remember being in the office right over here where we went ahead and it was later into the evening, and you were with a client, and you came into the office after they left with the biggest smile on your face, and she says, "I got February." And you did in fact have February. And today, this last month, we signed twice the number of IPs in January as we did the entire year that year, because we did get our 1 month. Yeah. That just shows you the kind of expansion that has taken place over the last 30 years.
I think surrogates, women come to us because we have a lot of experience. We've been doing this for 29 years. They learn about us through friends who've done surrogacy, relatives who've done it, our social media like Facebook, TikTok, whatever else might be out there. And we have a lot of programs like meetups for surrogates to, you know, help them learn about surrogacy and what we would do for them as an agency. We have taken the open adoption policy, I guess you could say, from the adoption work that John and I did, that John actually helped start the open adoption part, and we've just kind of transferred that to surrogacy. So we really encourage people to have open relationships during the pregnancy, and of course to continue that after the birth. And I think that it makes everybody feel really good about that relationship that they've created. It gives the child a lot more information about his or her, I don't know, history, birth history, I guess. And it seems like, you know, emotionally and psychologically, it's a much better way to start. We have we have an amazing staff at Northwest Surrogacy Center, which I think we cannot thank them enough, and they do a really good job of taking care of our both surrogates and intended parents.
You are right that it kind of moved from the adoption to the surrogacy, and I think that it worked because of Sandy. I mean, she started the program, and the surrogates want the same thing just about as everybody else does as they come in the door, and they want to be acknowledged and they want to be respected, and that is something that was a strong suit for you. And when I talk about respect, you could even say in some senses loved. And when I say that, I mean with a subjective understanding of who they were, of what they needed, and an appreciation for how we could help. And I think that that's the fundamental in establishing the relationships that not only work with individuals, but it's something that's strong enough so that you can really build a program around. And I think that you did really well at that, and that's why we're here today. Without that, we wouldn't be, or Northwest wouldn't look anything like it does today if it weren't for that.
It's been really important.
The groups are really different, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
There's the gay men who they come in talking about surrogacy. Their kids in the candy shop. You know, this is something that they were never sure that they could ever do, and in fact believed that was part of what was going to that they were never going to be parents because they were gay,
so then for them it's a really exciting experience, and they don't have all this sadness and things
exciting
that a straight couple would have, where a woman might have gone through years of fertility treatment or miscarriages and just lots of loss, or treatment for cancer or something like that prevents her from carrying a baby. And so those families frequently come with a sadder story, and
we're clearly Plan B.
We're clearly Plan B.
We're way down on the list, and sometimes C, so that they'll be unable to conceive and carry a child themselves, or they will find that adoption is unavailable to them, as it is to so many, and it's largely just a numbers game where there are far more people looking to adopt than there are adoptions available, children to adopt. And so there's surrogacy, and so we're kind of a little bit far down on the list. And I think a whole lot of them, when they enter the program, they're not really very hopeful. They're a little bit disbelieving. They've been disappointed so many times, first by their own pregnancies and then by trying to adopt and having failed at that, that they kind of don't believe that so many times that it can work. And this was probably truer in the beginning of the process than it is today. So now there's so much talk about surrogacy that people understand that it is viable, that it does work, and that our clients are successful. If they come into the program and they stick with the program, the likelihood of having a baby is really high. And I think people kind of are getting to know that now, and so maybe they're a little bit lighter in their step as a result of it.